Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first week of the Reformation class. My name is Jan Feldman, and I am part of the Adult Education Committee, and we are welcoming you here today to hear Dr. Ken Sawyer, who's a professor at McCormick Theological Seminary, and his specialty is early Christian history and the Reformation. Did I get that right? Great. We are going to be live streaming this class, just so you know. But I've had a little intel on Dr. Sawyer that not only did he recently celebrate his 40th wedding anniversary, yay, congratulations. But I've had some extra intel to know that last Monday was your birthday. So happy birthday. Thank you for sharing your birthday week with us. So we have several great classes coming up, and on the back table, there's a sheet that looks like this, and it has all of the fall offerings for adult ed. So pick one up, but also the information is always on the website. But pointing out several upcoming opportunities. The first is the last two sessions of the Bible study that coincides with the current devotional series, The Bible in 100 Passages. It's the first Tuesday of November and December coming up. Matt Helms is teaching, and I attended the October class and thought it was so great that I'm going back for the other two. So please join us. And also coming up is What is the Presbytery and Why Should We Care on November 23rd and December 7th, taking a week off in between for Thanksgiving. But it is taught by Ken Hockenberry, who of the Chicago Presbytery, so I'm sure we'll learn a lot. With that in mind, I'd like to offer an opening prayer and then turn the microphone over to Dr. Sawyer. Let us bow our heads. Dear Lord, as we gather together on this autumn day, we are grateful for your presence. Help us to tune out the noise of the world now so we can focus on this important topic of the Reformation. As we leave, bless us on our week's journey until we gather back here next week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Jan, thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you for the warm welcome back here to this wonderful room. And I'm just grateful to be here and grateful to be back with you in this most wonderful congregation. Thank you for your work and your witness in this community and more broadly in the region and in the nation. Thank you for engaging the costs of discipleship. Thank you for recognizing that the gospel still is good news. And it's nice to be in worship with y'all. I was in the very back where all the non-singers congregate. And I like to sing. So I needed to move. Right. So I like the welcome that you provide for those who come in from the street, right? And those who are uncertain just why they might be here or who they might be meeting or what they might be hearing. So thank you for your hospitality, for your enacted and embodied hospitality. So a lot of friends here. Thank you very much. Very good to be back. Catherine and I were talking earlier, and we agreed that if the speaker is not interesting, that we'd both leave. We'd both leave early. So.
I never said that.
Reformation Sunday. I don't know where to begin. I thought maybe this new book that just came out, Augustine the African. Where should the European Reformations begin? Maybe in Africa, maybe with Augustine. This is Catherine Koniber's newest book, and I'll pass it around so you can take a look. It's a biography of that gift to the church, that troubled soul, that man who said, I was looking for love. When he went to the U of C, University of Carthage, he arrived as a young man with his common law wife and their baby, the unplanned baby, that he called Adeodatus, gift of God. And while he was there, he said, I was in love with love. And in his autobiography, Open Letter, The Confessions, he says, I was in love with love, and I sought love wherever I could find it, in the theater, in beds that didn't belong to me, in the arms of strangers, in lecture hallways, anywhere I could find it. And that I loved your creatures, not knowing that you had created them. I loved the things that you created until those creatures who pointed to you pointed me to you, so I could find out where the source was that I was seeking, and so that my love might become more ordered, might become more sensible, might become sacramental. Right? So we commend this to you. There's a nice typographical cartographical trick on the cover. The map is inverted, right? So that Africa is at the center of the map, and Italy, while a destination, was a destination from Augustine's center to his periphery, right? Who's in the frame? That makes a big difference. Also, I left home this morning. I felt quite ill-equipped to be with y'all because I didn't have a pen with me. I ended up with 2 pairs of glasses, but no pen. So I borrowed this. And a couple nights ago, I was at down on 55th Street, a poetry reading and drama reading for formerly incarcerated people. One man who spent 28 years at Stateville and Menard and other places, and then was proved innocent and is home now. His name is his poetry name and pen name is Prince Salim. He said. Someone asked him when he started writing, and he said, well, I started writing to keep myself from killing myself. I was trying to figure out what to do with the injustice of this conviction. He said, God put a pen in my hand, and I bled through it. His life's blood came out through his use of that pen. Isn't that powerful?
Wow.
Yes, right. You can pass this around. I teach at McCormick Theological Seminary on the south side, and I'd very much like for you to stop by sometime and see about us. We've moved recently, within the last 2 years. We're in the same building with those other Reformation traditions. The Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, our long-term partners, and our long-term collaborators, Catholic Theological Union. It's been a great gift for us to be in this little building all together. It helps us to remind ourselves of the Catholicity of the faith that we confess, small c, and of the place, and to confront many of us in our Protestant bias and prejudice against Roman Catholicism, right? So come on by sometime. I teach church history. I'm also a recovering librarian. As you'll see, the last page of the handout is a bibliography with links. If you want to purchase it from Jeff Bezos, you can. But there are other ways, right? Like your nearest bookstore can order the book for you so that your cash does not line that billionaire's pockets. I bring greetings from my president, Maisha Handy, Dr. Maisha Handy. You should come and see about us. She's been here. She's coming back. She'll be here sometime, and you'll meet her and catch a glimpse of, you have a new pastor. I got to hear a sermon this morning. Thank you. New leadership, new possibilities, new hopes. It's great. So let's hope together and pray together and work together to see what can be done to be so daring as to call ourselves disciples in this time. Not a faith appropriate to the 1950s, but in these times, for these needs, for this era of lawlessness, this era of hopelessness, and of the erosion of the rule of law. I was sitting in my dentist's chair last week, and I asked the hygienist what she did, and she said she's from Edgewater. And so she said she was chasing ICE agents around. So I thought, oh, I need my whistle as well. I'm reminded, in this congregation especially, I'm reminded of the fugitive slave law. And I'm reminded of the ways by which citizens organized to intervene, to secure a safe haven for those who were pursued by slave catchers. They did not change the legal status of the people they were protecting, but they sought to preserve a space for a legal remedy. The rule of law, right? In these lawless times, we need to be reminded, as I remind my seminarians every day, that they are there to become teachers of the scriptures, teachers of the great histories, teachers of what it means to live into a faith which is lively and attentive to rules for their purposes, not as ends in and of themselves. That's what the Reformation is kind of about. I'm just grateful that we get a chance to study to talk. This is a conversation in 3 parts. Here we see Martin Luther and John Calvin doing what neither of them ever did, asking for directions. And it's interesting that Calvin is here because he had a particular name and particular honor, particular reverence and deference to Martin Luther. They disagreed about many things, and we're going to get into that. But John Calvin called Luther the pathfinder, the one who uncovered method and who engaged the gospel in a powerful and transformative way. How powerful is the word? That's a good question for us. In the beginning was the word. In the beginning, and archos, in the beginning was the word. What's the archos, though? It's anarchy. It's anti-hierarchicalism. It's a mess. It's disorder. It's what the Muslims call jahiliyyah. It's a time of disorder before the prophet showed up around the year 570. What is anarchos? In the beginning was the word. It's in the first verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the word. And that word is logos, right? Everybody knows enough Greek to say logos means word. Is word the right translation into Latin, verbum, or as Erasmus, as we'll see in a few minutes, he said that's too dull, too dried, too predictable. That instead we need a different word, a word favored by some of these North Africans in the early church. So when he translated the Greek word logos into Latin, he didn't choose the word verbum, word. He chose the word sermo. It's where we get our word sermon, meant to capture, meant to honor the liveliness of any conversation, the liveliness that should be carried by any message, the liveliness that should be carried by any teacher, the liveliness that should be characteristic of any hearers. That's what the sermon is about after the Reformation, right? That Protestant sermons are supposed to say something. And sanctuaries filled with hearers transformed from just viewers to participants, to those who fabricate, and that is to say, construct meaning in engagement with the living word, with the living sermo, with the dynamism of the word through which all things were created. Wow, that's quite a tradition. So we're talking about the Reformations. Pardon me? Oh, right. You know, I have this effect, right? Thank you. My password is my old teacher, Brian Garish, who used to worship here, right? We just lost him last year. Great teacher of confessions. And I get to teach his courses now. I wish I had been a better student of his. Now, Reformations of the 16th century. It's Reformation Sunday. Thank you so much for the invitation. How do we approach the Reformations? What are the Reformations? I put an S on them. Let's all, the whole talk today is sponsored by the letter S. And that S should be tacked onto the word Reformation, so that we're talking about plural movements. We're talking about not just one thing, but several things. We're talking about not just one sequence, but simultaneity. We're talking about people who may know each other but agree with each other, and people who sit right next to each other but don't know what the other person's thinking, right? That the Reformations, plural, first popularized by that great Lutheran scholar, Carter Lindbergh, who studied at the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago on the South Side. I would like to look at a couple of questions. How do we begin our conversation in these upended times? How do we approach this large topic? There are narrow narratives, right? So, and many of you were raised on them. You were raised a Presbyterian. Those of you who were raised Lutheran will know his biography. You know him. You know Marty, right? You were saying that you were a Presbyterian and went to Valparaiso University, and there, it's a Lutheran college.
It's Lutheran related, and we all called Luther Marty.
Yeah, right.
Our buddy.
Right. If you went to Heidelberg College, you'd talk about J.C., John Calvin, right? I don't know where you would go to mention Oecolampadius as your main thought, but there are good ways, narrow narratives. But the narrow narrative, as true as it is, misses many details, right? And so it's possible, those of you who have been on Reformation tours, you could go to Lutherland. Many of you have. You could be at UW, University of Wittenberg. You could walk the pathways from Erfurt to Wittenberg. You could learn about the Reformation through their main guy, Martin Luther, and miss his context and miss what questions he was seeking to answer. And you could miss the anxieties that he both voiced and engaged, right? So that's some of what we're going to try to do, is to put Marty into context. Hard for me to use that name. My teacher, Martin Marty. My beloved teacher, Martin Marty. So yes, with every insight, there are also blind spots, aren't there? How do we hold on to both of them? How do we build on the insights while acknowledging blind spots or being less defensive about them, right? How dare you point out the truth of my historical roots? Are my roots showing? Right. Here, what's in a name? If we call ourselves Lutherans, what are we? If we call ourselves Calvinists, what are we? If we call ourselves Jesuits and Roman Catholics, right? If we call ourselves Erasmians, that's where we're going to focus today. So, Desiderius Erasmus, sometimes known as that old Dutch bastard, because he was. He was the illegitimate child of a priest. And he had no place, no name, no prospect, no grip on the world that he grew up in. He had an older brother, similarly illegitimate. How is a child legitimate or illegitimate? I don't know about that. Jesse Jackson says, right, I was illegitimate. And then he found, like Luther and like Erasmus, he found what he needed in the church. I appreciated in the sermon today those who are not sure what they might find in the church, or in so many ways, the church finds them. The church finds us. The church is the place to rest long enough to realize what conversations are going on, and which conversations we wish to be a part of, and which truths we dare to confess, and which issues we dare to confront and engage. The church ought to be a safe space, a third space, a space of confession, a space of rehabilitation, and a space of bravery as well. Right, Erasmus, illegitimate. He was born in the 1460s, and attends one of the local lay academies run by a group of folk, lay people, the Brothers and Sisters of the Common Life. They are not monastic, but they live as if they were part of a monastic community. They are part of one of the many, many renewal movements of the late medieval period. Before Luther, right? Erasmus trains with them. Luther trains with them. The Brothers and Sisters of the Common Life, they earn their income on a very bad business plan. They copy manuscripts in the 15th century, right at the time of the invention of the printing press. So, bad business plan, but great pious communities. And that's where Erasmus learns to read. That's where he learns to stand. That's where he learns to receive all that the church has: a name, a place, a vocation, criticism, education, discipline. What he lacked, he found in the church. Right. He is a bright boy and a sharp wit, and he's sent to school. He becomes an Augustinian. He takes vows as a monk, but the life as a monk is not good for him. He's better with a pen in his hand. I don't know if he bled through the pen, but he came close to it. He goes to study. He becomes one of the finest Latinists in his era. He goes to England. He begins to study Greek. Where does the Greek come from? Not many people were studying Greek. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 is preceded by generations of anxious Greek scholars who bring their precious Greek manuscripts with them to the West. And increasingly, Greek then is available at the great centers of learning, like at UP, University of Paris. In 1457, the first courses in Greek are offered. What does this do? This revives the study of texts and casts a shadow on the most authoritative book of the time, the Vulgate, the Latin Bible, the Bible of Jerome, the Bible from the early church, the most sacred text, the Latin Vulgate. As we'll see, for Erasmus, the study of the text is a central confession of his. It's deeply rooted in his own piety and in his own scholarship. Where does he get that? That's part of what we'll be talking about today. The Devotio Moderna, the Brethren of the Common Life, the movements of renewal and reform over the course of the first half of the 15th century are deeply rooted in a particular form of piety. Suspicious of hierarchy, suspicious of self-aggrandizement, wary of the glittering jewels of the established church, and stressing and emphasizing an inward piety, downward mobility, selfless vocation. Wow. This is perhaps best illustrated in one of the key documents from this movement of renewal and reform. It's a book that some of you know. It's the most popular book in the Western world after the Bible. It was on Oprah's book club for years. No, not really. It's called The Imitation of Christ. Have you heard of it? Yes. It's not very popular nowadays. It's fallen off, but until the 1960s, it was a bestseller. It's still in print, and that it's a great stocking stuffer. I'm just saying. The Imitation of Christ. You have some selections from it, and I'd like for us to take a look at some of these. Let's see. The Imitation of Christ. Right. That's great. I walked up with the wrong photocopies. But so, The Imitation of Christ, you have it there. Who will be brave enough to read from that first paragraph of The Imitation of Christ? It's credited to a person, thank you, who was the master of novices, Thomas à Kempis. Counsels on the Spiritual Life, Chapter 1, on the Imitation of Christ. Who is this Christ? Our sermon today said, look to Christ. This text says, imitate Christ. Don't be inspired by him, but in fact, be so inspired by him that you become like him. Imitate him. The imitatio tradition is very rich and very deep and quite varied as well. Let's see how it is that Thomas à Kempis begins this, please. And if you could read in your best Devotio Moderna voice.
I'll do my best. Book 1, Counsels on the Spiritual Life. Chapter 1, on the Imitation of Christ. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, says our Lord.
The microphone is coming to you.
Here you go. Thanks for the folks online. Okay. Book 1, Counsels on the Spiritual Life. Chapter 1, on the Imitation of Christ. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, says our Lord. In these words, Christ counsels us to follow his life and way if we desire true enlightenment and freedom from all blindness of heart. Let the life of Jesus Christ, then, be our first consideration. The teaching of Jesus Christ far transcends all the teachings of the saints, and whoever has his Spirit will discover concealed in it heavenly manna. But many people, although they often hear the gospel, feel little desire to follow it, because they lack the Spirit of Christ. Whoever desires to understand and take delight in the words of Christ must strive to conform his whole life to him. Shall I continue?
Yes, please. That's not my underlining. I don't
Okay.
underline in books unless they're mine, but some nervous student underlined here, and so please.
Of what use is it to discourse learnedly on the Trinity if you lack humility and therefore displease the Trinity? Lofty words do not make a man just or holy, but a good life makes him dear to God. I would far rather feel contrition than be able to define it.
Boom. Keep going, please.
If you knew the whole Bible by heart and all the teachings of the philosophers, how would this help you without the grace and love of God?
Thank you. So you get the picture, right? It's not the external, it's the internal. It's not the words, it's the spirit. It's not the rules, it's the bend of the heart, right? That it's not the office, it's the person in the office, right? That there's an internalism here. There's a critique of the hierarchy here, that they've got the offices, right? There's a rather interesting oppositionalism here, right? That stresses this interiority, this spiritual emphasis, and this suspicion of worldly success. Indeed, the term that they used is contemptus mundi, contempt for the world. Wow, that's a little hard for me to take. Because I read that God so loved the world that God gave God's only Son, right? So what is proper love? I mean, that's proper self-love, proper love of the world, proper love of our neighbors. What does it mean? You know, we're back to Augustine's question here, right? How is it that our love can be properly ordered? Among the Devotio Moderna and the Brethren of the Common Life and the Imitation of Christ, they say the best way to do that is, I think they were quoting Eminem, is to lose yourself, right? To lose yourself by, Akempis said it. He said, find a community that is sufficiently obscure that it won't, we would say, won't be an ornament on your resume. Find the job in that community that is the least respected. Take that job. Serve your community and stay in that job long enough until you can hear the Word of God and apply it to yourself instead of filtering it through how your self-interest will seek to maximize your opportunities. And so it is through the resistance to beginning and the suspicion of ends that the Imitation of Christ urges individuals in the 15th century. That's interesting. Erasmus carries this piety with him, and he translates it, and he engages Renaissance philosophy with it. And so his movement of renewal and reform, his proclamation of the Philosophia Christi, his exhortation to those who are in power, that it's not the church officers, it's the people, that's the church. And those who serve in ministry are best understood the way he says, the way he understands himself, as a teacher, who are seeking to teach themselves out of a job. And so Erasmus, over the course of his career, brings this piety into his works and shouts it out. He's a good Renaissance person, a good Renaissance humanist. I heard a lecture recently, a very conservative speaker saying, and when I use that word humanist, I don't mean atheist. Well, humanism has gained a reputation that we need to be better historians to understand that the humanist tradition is part of our our heritage, our legacy, and is essential to our understanding of what it means to be human and what we can be as faithful believers as well. Right. Erasmus, as a good Renaissance humanist scholar, takes as his watchword the little Latin phrase, ad fontes. Let's all say it, ad fontes, ad fontes. It means to the sources, back to the sources, return to the sources, consult the sources. I mean, it's what happened with the Heidelberg Catechism. The translation into English was wrong, and it was homophobic in its English rendering. And so the PCUSA, in pursuit of its best scholarly principles and humanist framework, said, let's go to the sources. Let's consult the German. Let's actually produce the best text possible. This is Erasmus. Consult the best text possible in their original languages. He's one of the best Latinists of his time. He's becoming one of the best Greek scholars of his time. How does that show itself? He publishes the first Greek New Testament. He gathers together what manuscripts he can find, and he publishes them in 1516. He does something stunning. He also, one column is the Greek New Testament, and the other column is the Vulgate. But the Vulgate with his suggestions and recommendations for different renderings. Right, so right there, something is happening. Perhaps the most important book that nobody knows about is Erasmus and his Greek New Testament of 1516. It too is available online. It comes out in a second edition in 1519, and then a subsequent edition in 1522. And my hope is that one product of this class will be, y'all will come down to Hyde Park so I can come with you and introduce the rare book collection of the Lutheran School of Theology, where they have a first edition Erasmus New Testament and a second edition as well. Well, right, it's just a good time, right? So let's plan for that, all right? It is that second edition that then is used for translating the New Testament into French, into English, into Italian, into a variety of vernacular languages. Wow! So these are not translations from the Latin. These are translations from the Greek, from the New Testament Greek. And the Greek then is placed in conversation with and ultimately in judgment of the Latin translation renderings. Wow! This is a leverage. This is a point of leverage that changes everything and renders the invention of the printing press into a potent tool for social change. Gutenberg, the great entrepreneur, invents movable type, but also he's a great ink master. Any ink masters in the room? I went past a stationery store last week on Lake Street, and they were having a big party. Mix your own ink. I think, I got to get out more. This is great. Mix your own ink. Gutenberg was an ink mixer as well. And he developed an ink that would adhere to the metal type that he had developed. So that there are two revolutions that he initiated. First, movable type, but then also the ink by which the type would adhere to paper. The ink would adhere to the paper. And then there's a subsequent revolutionary move in the development of woodcuts. Now, I gave you one woodcut of my favorite from the 16th century, Argula von Grumbach. Let's all say her name and get it out and over with. Argula von Grumbach. Let's say it. Argula von Grumbach. Right. Gesundheit. Right. All right. So Erasmus, then, this scholar, puts into the hands of his friends and into the hands of his competitors and in the hands of his enemies the very tools that are needed for, I hear the bagpipes in the morning, right? Erasmus puts in the hands of his friends and his opponents the very tools for social change beyond his dreams and closer to his nightmares, right? He dies in 1536, a broken person. He doesn't like what his Reformation looks like, what the Reformations are unfolding to be. Beware of what you pray for. Beware of what you yearn for. Beware of what you are seeking. I pray for revival, but I'm not sure what that revival is going to look like, right? I pray for the revival of the rule of law, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like either. We need to pray cautiously. I like the fact that your pastor's dissertation was waging war on one's knees. I like that. I also like praying with my eyes open. Right? How is it that the prayers of the faithful can be informed by the stories of the godly and the warnings of the lives of the ungodly? Both. This is part of what Erasmus is pursuing. Now, I've included two other handouts. One, a little handbook that he wrote called the Enchiridion, and then a book that he wrote with a play on words for his friend Thomas More, In Praise of Folly, Encomium More, in praise of More, in praise of the moronic, in praise of folly, right? So, do you have those with you? Any Hilary Mantel fans? Anyone watching Wolf Hall? Or what's the name of the second series? Right. It's about Henry VIII, and he's tiresome. Come on, please. He needed some counseling. I think we could admit. But he had legal counsel in the person of Thomas Cromwell, and Thomas Cromwell was at the center of this dramatic retelling. It's thrilling for me because for the last 40 years I've been a big fan of Thomas Cromwell, and I like the actor Mark Rylance, but I really think that Cromwell may come off a bit too well in this dramatization. Still worth seeing. Thomas More is also an advisor to the king, and he's friends with Erasmus. Erasmus brings his Devotio Moderna piety and his Renaissance training into the publication of the Greek New Testament and the provision of the annotations which recommend other renderings of particular Greek into Latin terms. So, for example, is marriage best understood as a sacrament, one of the 7 sacraments, or as a mystery? It should be both, right? Right? The best marriages are, right? Are both. Is it a sacramentum, or is it best translated as mystery? Or when Mary is greeted, full of grace or favored one? What is the best rendering? If full of grace, then there is part then of the sacramental tradition. Or when in the book of Acts, be penitent or do penance? Which? I mean, next week when we take a look at the 95 Theses of Martin Luther, he grabs hold of those texts and says, the rendering is wrong in the Vulgate. Let's go back to the sources. He's enough of a humanist to say the Greek text stands over the Vulgate. The Greek text, the Bible stands over our tradition and ought to encourage us to amend and revise and correct according to the best text possible in the original languages. So the 16th century is a time of renewal and revival. It's also a time of the revival of nationalisms, of vernacular languages, of divisions, right? It's really the birth of the strongest forms of the early nation state as well. Erasmus is international, not national. He favors Latin rather than the vernacular languages, and he is a pacifist rather than an advocate of nationally directed warfare. Wow. He understands himself to be a citizen of Christendom. Although he was in the Low Countries, he was in the Germanies, he was in England. He got his doctorate at UT, University of Turin. He was an internationalist in an increasingly national or nationalistic era. Wow. So those whom he equipped come to consider him to be problematic. Wow. Luther says, as we'll see next week, he says, the more I read Erasmus, the less I like him. What is it that he doesn't like? He likes the fact that for Erasmus, satire, irony, ambiguity, resignation are key values. In a time of increasing doctrinal specificity, Erasmus is saying, no, it's not the specifics, it's the heart. It's not the elaborate rules, it's the inclination of the heart. It's not the insight of the scholastics, but rather the burning heart of the mystics that, he says he learns from and teaches aspects of the scholastic tradition, but also says they are pointing to a reality beyond their scholastic verbiage, right? That there's a purpose for their method. And that as a good humanist, he prefers dialectic to the scholastic methodologies of definitional argumentation, right? So let's take a look at the other readings by Erasmus. The first one, let's look at the Enchiridion. I will. Thank you. My cord is causing discord. And I want concord. Right, all right. So the first text is the Enchiridion. What does that word mean, Enchiridion? It means, it's commonly translated as handbook. But it's really an ancient term. Augustine wrote one, an Enchiridion. It means like the sword that you would carry if you were traveling through a difficult and dangerous territory, right? When I first moved to Chicago, I grew frightened, and I carried my great uncle's paring knife, right? And my sister said, "What are you doing? What you're going to skin yourself." Anyway, so the Enchiridion, I should have been carrying that instead. I should have carried my Augustine with me, or Erasmus in his Enchiridion. Let's read a little bit of that Enchiridion, all right? Just a sample. Could you read a brief sample with the microphone, please? Could you?
Erasmus of Rotterdam to John the German, his courtier friend. greeting. You have entreated with no ordinary zeal, best beloved brother of the Lord, in the Lord, that are prescribed for you a sort of compendious guide for living.
Right, he's claiming a lot here, right? He says, this guide will help you.
That having been instructed by it, you can arrive at a state of mind worthy of Christ. Indeed, you say that while for a long time you have been pushing forward in court life, you have been concerned how you can flee from Egypt with its vices and delights, and with Moses as leader, be happily set upon the road to virtue.
Thank you. Fellow Egyptians, we need to find our Moses, right? Erasmus says, this text will help you. Listen to Moses so you can walk on dry land into the whatever promised land that is promised to us. The life of a man, a person, should be watchful. We need to be attentive. We need to be alive to the snares that are available to us, before us, the temptations, right? It is the moralism of the Devotio Moderna, this renewal movement that he was raised up in, that he read, that he was soaked in. He was, I guess, Erasmus was a marinated saint. He marinated in the piety of the imitation of Christ. So on the next page, focusing on baptism, could you begin with, first of all, as you too must remember?
First of all, as you too must remember, Job, that veteran, undefeated soldier, testifies that the life of mortals is nothing else than a sort of perpetual warfare, and that the generality of mankind is too often deceived, whose minds that schemer, the world, holds in the grips of the most seductive wantonness.
Right, this is an expression of his old imitation of Christ motto, the contempt of the world. We need to be sufficiently chastened that we don't love the world so much as to lose sight of who we are and whose we are and why we're doing what we think we're doing. And he's writing to a soldier, so he's, as somebody who was raised in a military family, I kind of resonate with this text. I say it's kind of hard to grow up in a military family, so I'm thinking maybe some non-militant examples from the pen of Erasmus would be as insightful as this more militant handbook. But this proved to be a very, very popular book. It was a bestseller. It made him a celebrity. It was first published in 1501, and then later editions. Oh, that's Erasmus. I wonder if he's got his handbook with him, right? He was welcomed at the courts across Europe, even as he claimed not to belong to anyone, any of them, or any of these national and increasingly nationalistic groups. Everybody wanted to land him. Why doesn't he teach here? Why isn't he at our court? We want Erasmus. He's one of us, isn't he? People would want to claim him. The northern humanists especially wanted him because they used the methods that he taught. Ad fonts, comparison of text, what we would call intertextuality in conversations among sources. But their nationalism put him off. And their emphasis on the vernacular put him off, on the language of the people that put him off. And so he traveled from place to place to place. Thank you for your good reading. Thank you. I would like for us to move to this last reading, and I commend all of these readings to you. It's just good reading. Erasmus, in his book that he wrote for his friend Thomas More, Encomium More, in Praise of Folly, in which, again, he expresses this imitatio tradition by contrasting the external with the internal, the fleshly with the spiritual, the worldly with the Christian, and the successful. I mean, he just problematizes this concept of what is success. He says, just as Thomas à Kempis said, that success is measured by your conformity to Christ, not by whether or not you work for Accenture, right? the praise of folly. In this, let's turn. He says Christ is a fool. He says truth is foolish. He says that those of us who are taught to be prudent ought to be sufficiently prudent to realize the limits of our prudence. And that if we pray too much, it's imprudent. If we fast too long, it's imprudent. If we give too much, if we serve too often, if we're on too many boards, it becomes an impediment. So those of us who have confused exhaustion for effectiveness and overextension for faithfulness might need to read a little bit of Erasmus. Self-care is pastoral care. Self-care is part of the ways of flourishing. If we turn to the next page, let's turn to the topic of the happiness of fools. Who has the microphone, and who would be so bold as to... Jan, could you, do you have the text?
I'm a little lost on where we are right now.
All right.
But I'd be happy to turn this over to someone who isn't.
Let's turn to page 118. Page 118 at the bottom. And paragraph that is numbered number 38. But I should not further pursue.
Do we have any volunteers to be a reader? Thank you. Thank you.
38?
Yes, please. But I should not further pursue that which is infinite. Let me speak compendiously. Okay.
Okay, from there. The Christian religion on the whole seems to have a kinship with some sort of folly, while it has no alliance whatever with wisdom. If you want proofs of this statement, observe first of all how children, old people, women, and fools find pleasure beyond other folk in holy and religious things, and to that end are ever nearest the altars, led, no doubt, solely by an impulse of nature. Then you will notice that the original founders of religion, admirably laying hold of pure simplicity, were the bitterest foes of literary learning. Lastly, no fools seem to act more foolishly than do the people whom zeal for Christian piety has got possession of. For they pour out their wealth, they overlook wrongs, allow themselves to be cheated, make no distinction between friends and enemies, shun pleasure, glut themselves with hunger, wakefulness, tears, toils, and reproaches. They disdain life and dearly prefer death. In short, they seem to have grown utterly numb to ordinary sensations, quite as if their souls lived elsewhere and not in their bodies.
Okay, thank you. This is good. This is an intellectual talking about the limits of intellectualism, right? This is a scholar talking about the boundaries of his scholarly inquiry. This is a very profoundly prudent man who's talking about the ways by which his prudence has sometimes been an impediment to his piety, right? And that in the simplicity of a child's confession, he may find greater truth than in the pronouncements of a prancing prelate, he would say, right? So on the next page, we bring this then to the Christology that will later be presented, as we'll see next week, by none other than Marty. Let me read this out. What do all these things cry out? Page 116. What do all these things cry out to us, if not this, that mortal men, even the pious, are fools? And that Christ, in order to relieve the folly of mankind, thought himself the wisdom of the Father, was willing in some manner to be made a fool when he took upon himself the nature of a man and was found in fashion as a man. And likewise he was made to be sin that he might heal sinners. Right. So that the foolishness of the cross is a theme which speaks directly to Luther. He says it's in contradiction. It's not in strength, but in the power of powerlessness. It's in the witness of the cross that the truth of God critiques empire, critiques power, critiques establishment, and enables us to dare to call ourselves disciples, even if it is in contrast to what the rest of our culture may encourage us to consider. So I would like for us to broaden our frame to include Erasmus, Luther, yes, second generation Calvin, second generation Ignatius. But you have for your reading for next week something in this woman's hand. This is Argula von Grumbach, whose name you have pronounced, Argula von Grumbach. And there she is at the U of I, the University of Ingolstadt. This man, Johannes Eck, was one of Luther's opponents. Johannes Eck, John the Corner. He sought to corner Luther and to critique him. Johann Eck critiques her for daring to speak to him. She, a woman, dares. Right. So as you read that chapter of Argula von Grumbach, she's defending herself. And she says, I've come by this honestly because I stand on the gospel. And she also says, when I was 10 years old, my parents did a very strange thing. They gave me a Bible. And I read those stories into my life, and I read myself into that text. And so those who refuse to testify will be silent. But she says, I choose to speak. Right. So you will read about her, and we'll talk about her a little bit. And you also all have a copy of this magnificent image as well. So I think regardless of whatever happens in this class, you've got that image. Right. And this also should remind us that the 16th century is an era of martyrs. There is blood on the streets, blood on every page. There is cost to the discipleship that is answered by all the different groups of the Reformation. They're pretty good at killing each other. And that the story of tolerance is its own story. And it is a difficult story in which the condemned are part of the story, and those who do the condemning are also part of the story, by which freedom of conscience emerges year by year, step by step, in part as a living out of the scripts of resistance to tyranny that you talked about from the Book of Confessions, and in part in an application of the tools of humanism to critique the authorities of the time. That the Vulgate should be critiqued by the New Testament in the best text possible in the original languages, and that the conversation needs to be informed by the best scholarship. That's the tradition that the Reformation offers us, to go to the sources, to be bold enough to dare to call ourselves disciples in this time, and to be instructed by, as we were reminded from today's sermon, by that great cloud of witnesses that stretches back through time. It includes the courageous and the courageous, those who win victories, and those who win victories through death as well. When we see this, then we've broadened the conversation dramatically. And we also need then to broaden it yet further, to talk about the transition from scribes to printers, to recognize that whatever was happening in the 16th century was happening as the world became larger. Here's an image from Mexico City, Tenochtitlan. It's just 500 years ago that remarkable Aztec civilization fell to Spanish conquistadors and their allies. And then also the larger world here. Here's the richest man in world history, Mansa Musa. This is from a map from the 1380s, the Catalan Atlas, the ways by which Africa needs to be at the center of our imaginings. Because when people talk about the New World, from 1450 to 1550, they were talking primarily about Africa, and then eventually began to talk about the new territories over here in our part of the world. This is the context into which Martin Luther steps. And it is his pathway, his development, his articulation of the anxieties of his time that we will devote ourselves to next week. All right? Thank you.
Much.